Welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Nick Tasso at The Inefficient 2. Taking a look at pitching on tonight's 9-game slate for FanDuel and DraftKings. You do have Max Scherzer obviously going tonight. Not a perfect matchup, but certainly is kind of that tier 1 option.
Yeah, absolutely. Scherzer obviously is the top guy, and there's also a couple other guys who a little priced up on this slate, but I think definitely are in play.
Yeah, certainly are. The first one here, obviously, Baltimore and Washington, Max Scherzer versus Ubaldo Jimenez. We don't really need to dive into Jimenez, one of the guys you can probably stack against, because there are a few candidates you can actually really go on full team stacks against today.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a good amount of bad pitchers on this slate that you could feel pretty confident utilizing a lot of guys from the same lineup, and Jimenez is one of those guys. He's just really out of the bullpen. He's been inefficient, so I think this spot start's really not going to do him wonders.
No, I don't think so either. And obviously that puts Scherzer in a really good spot to grab a win. And obviously Scherzer hasn't been the most dominant of late. And it just kind of shows in his price as well as the matchup. 11-6 isn't too bad on DraftKings. For a pitcher that we're usually used to seeing, over 13K most of the time. But struggled against Atlanta. Obviously at Coors he struggled, which is, fine. I mean, it's kind of something you expect from most pitchers anyway. But I actually look for him to have a bounce-back game here. Baltimore's been the bottom 5 in WOBA in the second half. A pretty reasonable strikeout rate for them as well. I think Scherzer has a solid start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's viable on both sites, both kind of matchups, tournaments, and cash. Just because you look at this lineup for Baltimore, and although they have a bunch of power, they can still get hit pretty hard. Get struck out pretty hard. So I definitely like Scherzer here. And there's really no one else, in my opinion, where I really want to pay up for.
Yeah, it's certainly, paying up, obviously DraftKings, it's a little bit tougher because you have Happ and Ray right in that same kind of price range. FanDuel, a little bit different. Hamels is right there, but it's a noticeable pay down option between the two sites. And Scherzer, been better at home this year. The home runs haven't really been an issue when he's been pitching in his home ballpark. In comparison to on the road, he's given up 18 away from home, just 7 at home. So obviously Baltimore is a high power team. I think he'll be okay here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm staying on the strikeouts from Baltimore. That probably will happen a lot from Scherzer. So that will definitely help him out, even if he is able, gets hit a little bit hard, gives up a home run here or there.
Yeah, it definitely could be. Angels and Blue Jays next year. Jays are minus 255 favorites, and there's kind of another stacking target here with Jared Weaver on the hill. But it does put Jay Happ, who's been very good this season, facing a middle-of-the-road offense where Estrada, it didn't take him long to realize that, well, you need to just kind of work around a couple of guys in this lineup and you'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Happ, again, is another good matchup. I don't know if I really like his price on DraftKings because it is pretty up there, and at that point you might as well just spend up for Scherzer, a little bit more consistent, not as of late obviously, but I just like the name value of Scherzer in the matchup. So Happ, I do kind of like him, but there are a bunch of righties in that lineup as we saw yesterday. I don't think they're really going to do too much like they did against Estrada, even though they do have potential.
Yeah, I definitely don't see that either. When you look at this Angels offense against lefties this year, middle of the road, they rank 15th in WOBA, but they don't strike out a ton. So I can see why when you smush in between Scherzer and Ray, who obviously have the high strikeout upside tonight, it makes it a little bit different. But the way Happ's been missing bats, kind of like getting timely strikeouts. Over his last few starts, 9, 7, 6, 11 strikeouts against a couple of good teams. So I'm certainly okay with using them, but obviously it's just more because of the slate that we're put into where you're not forced to use Happ, but he becomes a top option.
Yeah, kind of agree with you there. Like you said, he's been pretty good as of late, so I definitely don't mind him at all.
Next game here, you get the Royals and Marlins. Tom Koehler versus Edison Volquez. Tom Koehler obviously in the midst of a nice little stretch here, going up against the Royals offense that's bottom 5 in WOBA against righties. Average strikeout rate, I think, is an SP2 on DraftKings. You can make a case for him. Just because I do think this game is going to be very low scoring. FanDuel, I'm not quite sure. There's a ton of upside there. I kind of rather pay up.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I think Koehler, too, is in a good spot for a win here. I know Volquez is up and down, but his struggles mainly come away from Kauffman Stadium. So if he has one of those bad outings, I think Koehler would be in line for a win. And at that price tag, if you get that bonus win on either site, it definitely is going to help your team out.
Yeah, definitely. And as you kind of mentioned, Volquez on the road really hasn't been that great. I'm not really looking to use him, even though he is cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I can see why people would use him, but for me, he is right now he's a stay away whenever he's away from Kauffman Stadium, just because his volatility.
Yep, definitely agree with you. Mets and Cardinals next year. Cardinals are minus 169 favorites. Adam Wainwright versus Seth Lugo. Wainwright's a guy who I'm going to write off on FanDuel just because of that price tag, 8,400. That's a little high for me. DraftKings 6,900 makes you kind of think. You obviously look at this Mets offense that is starting to get healthy. I mean, Jay Bruce may or may not be in the lineup tonight, but obviously they do have Cespedes back. Wainwright's a guy who has pitched better at home, which does kind of bring me a little bit intrigued. And I think if you want to pay up for a high price stack, Wainwright or Kohler kind of might be one of the guys you might have to dive down to at an SP2 spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. That FanDuel price just really sets him out. So I'm staying away from him on all formats on FanDuel, but definitely SP2 on DraftKings. He's definitely in play. I mean, you look at this Mets offense, and they really don't do too much on most nights. They hit Garcia hard the other night, but he was a lefty, and I think Wainwright, his experience against some of these hitters really could propel him to have a really nice outing.
Yeah, I definitely think so too. And Mets, I mean, 26th in WOBA. Wainwright's a guy, I mean, has allowed 13 home runs this year, but they've all come on the road. I mean, he's really limited damage at home, has been better off at home, averaging about 10 DK points more at home. So I think that kind of plays into a little bit of a factor there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at his price tag, that's one of the lowest times that we've seen Wainwright at when he's been at home. So I definitely think when you consider everything, that DraftKings price tag is fine for both cash and GPPs.
Yep, definitely agree. And Seth Lugo on the other side had a decent start up against the Giants, but tougher offense here. I'm not looking to use him.
No, he's cheap, and he could have a good outing because sometimes the St. Louis offense just takes the night off. But that's with almost any offense. It's just one of those things. I think they'll hit him pretty hard, so it's an easy fade for me.
Yep, definitely. Indians Rangers next year. Josh Tomlin taking on Cole Hamels. Hamels is an interesting kind of target tonight because I think obviously he's at home, has had a little bit of trouble at home at times. Going up against an Indians offense that middle of the road against lefties, decent strikeout rate, 21.3%. I don't feel completely comfortable with it, but I definitely like it in GPPs.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like his price tag kind of on both sides. You look at Hamels, and you can drop down a little bit from him. Obviously, he's not safe going up against Cleveland for cash, but definitely in GPPs, I think he's priced nicely. You're able to fit him in, and you kind of just go with it. We've seen this offense, they kind of not get shut down a lot, but it is possible. And against a good pitcher like Hamels, he can definitely do that. My concerns with Hamels, as always, is just the home runs, but to me, he's been able to do a little bit better job lately.
Yeah, it definitely has. A lot of that struggle did come at the beginning of the year. I do see him as a good favorite for a win, minus 154. He's always a guy who does go kind of in deep into games as well. He's not quite like David Price, but he does have that kind of bonus where he gives you that extra inning or two where he kind of makes up the difference if he does give up 3 earned runs or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And unlike David Price, I don't think he gives up as many hits, so I definitely don't mind Hamels here.
Yeah, definitely don't. On the other side, looking at Josh Tomlin, in this ballpark, the way he gives up home runs, it's just kind of an easy stay away.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you here. Texas obviously is a bad ballpark to use starting pitchers, but definitely think it's going to hurt Tomlin here. It might help Hamels just because he's familiar with the park, but definitely staying away from Tomlin.
Yeah. Mariners and White Sox next year, James Paxton versus Anthony Renuato. Renuato is a guy who he can stack against for me. Obviously, he's been horrible each time he started in the majors, which isn't a ton, but for what he's given you, it's not really worth a look.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I feel like every single start, he can't get to 5 innings, and he gives up at least 4 or 5 runs. He's really a bad pitcher, so I definitely agree. Stay away. And on the flip side for Paxton, I know it's his first start coming back, so he should be in line for the win, though.
Yeah, I like him a lot on FanDuel as a $7,300 option. I feel like he is a little bit overpriced on DraftKings at 97. But you can certainly make a case for him. I mean, this White Sox offense is not good against lefties. Still have to watch out for a couple of bats, but they're a bottom 10 offense, and that strikeout rate, 22.4%. I think Paxton's actually a viable GPP option.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there that he is a little overpriced, but at the same time, if you're able to still fit him in and have quality bats, I definitely don't mind him. I'm not really scared that it's his first start back. He looked good before he went to the DL, so I think he's just going to kind of resume everything.
Yep, definitely. Pittsburgh and Milwaukee here. Willie Peralta versus Chad Kuhl. At first glance, I was kind of intrigued with Kuhl. Then I was like, I backed off a little bit. I was like, I know he's cheap on DraftKings, but I just don't see that he's going to have a ton of upside. I mean, I know Milwaukee does have a really high strikeout rate against righties, but I just think it's a little bit of trouble in that ballpark.
Yeah, I agree with you there. If this was in Pittsburgh, I think it'd be a little bit different, and you could definitely probably play cool. But the way it stands right now, I know Milwaukee is heavily right-handed. They could still hit them hard, though, so I definitely could use them in GPPs. I understand that. There is a small upside, especially at his price tag, 6,600, still reasonable, but at the same time, I'd probably just use Wainwright on DraftKings, so that's the only reason why I'm probably off him a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And Willie Peralta, obviously, he's been a little bit better, but obviously still not a good pitcher, a guy you can stay away from.
Yeah, I agree with you. I could never
Whoa, was that some hesitation there?
It was just because he's put up some sort of decent run, not his last start obviously, but it was before that since he's been called up, he hasn't been too bad. And at 4,600 DraftKings, I mean, you could put a big stack in there, and you could put him, maybe even Wainwright if you get lucky, and have a pretty decent night in GPPs.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I look at Peralta's last four starts, and the Mets, Braves, and Reds. Three really inconsistent offenses, and then he really blew up against Seattle. Well, he didn't blow up, but he didn't have a great start. And I think that was just more because of the matchup there. And obviously the Pirates, I kind of just like their bats more than actually using him here.
Yeah, I'm definitely not recommending him. But if you look at him, I'm not comparing him to Doug Fister, but you look at Peralta and Fister, and they both struggled against lefties, and Pirates can only throw a couple lefties into the lineup, and if he's able to work around those, he still could come out with a nice night. Obviously, Fister was playing at a much more favorable ballpark than Peralta, so that is a little bit different. But I'm saying it is still possible, just definitely not my cup of tea.
Yeah. Braves and Diamondbacks next here. Robbie Ray versus Matt Whistler. Ray's obviously a guy who I do like quite a bit. Kind of a big pricing difference between FanDuel and DraftKings. I mean, 8,800 on FanDuel. He is 10-4 on DraftKings. I mean, I do like him on both sides. I do think he's been very solid of late. Obviously, a great matchup against this Braves team that does struggle against lefties. A little bit of a park factor worry, but I do think the strikeout upside's there. I think he gets a win. For me, Ray's in that midst of his progression that was kind of due.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you there. My issue with Ray is just his price tag on DraftKings. It's hard to really get behind someone at that price who has a 5.13 ERA in that ballpark. And I know the Braves still have a lot of lefties in there. He's still allowing a 287 WOBA, so it's not like he's shutting down lefties. So with that price tag, I kind of am a little weary of it. Although on FanDuel, I really don't mind him at that 8,800. That's kind of nice. You can fit him into GPPs and still have a good amount of offense.
Yeah, definitely could. And, I mean, you look at what he's done. I mean, the strikeout rate, it's second to Scherzer on tonight's slate. So, I mean, it's something that he's had throughout this entire year. He does miss a lot of bats. And while the Braves are able to kind of throw in a couple more righties nowadays, it's still not anything that scares you away.
No, absolutely. I don't think he's going to get hit hard, but there is still that potential. And when I'm spending 5 digits on a starting pitcher, I don't like having that potential there.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. And Whistler on the other side, very cheap arm, making his start back from injury against his Diamondbacks offense that's really been heating up of late. Stay away from me.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at his past few games, and for the deal, they weren't good. So I really don't see why all of a sudden he'd figure it out.
Yeah, me either. Next one here, you got the Giants and the Dodgers. Obviously, we saw a 1-0 game last night, another low-scoring game projected for tonight. But I just feel like this game, I mean, alone, is just kind of one where I'm just not even looking at as far as hitters and pitching standpoint goes.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think it's kind of a trap game for the starting pitchers. Look at Strickland, and he's been okay, but it's still the Giants' offense. They can kind of throw up a decent amount of guys up there to hit them hard. So for me, I'm staying away from Strickland. Moore's price tag on FanDuel kind of turns me off, but I think he's a decent play on DraftKings for SP2. He's pretty cheap, so I really don't mind him. It's just, to me, he really hasn't shown much since getting traded to the National League.
Yeah, certainly. And you look at Moore, I mean, he's one of those guys where 6,700, obviously a viable option. For me, his walk rate is just something I cannot stomach watching coming into the night. I did it the other night, whatever it was, a couple starts ago, and it was like he walked 4 or 5 guys, and it was just, it's so infuriating watching him pitch at times. But Dodgers offense, not that great against lefties, so I can certainly see why it would be an attractive matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't feel safe playing him in cash, but he's still a pitcher who has that strikeout upside. And if he was able to hone in his walk issues just for this one start, it would definitely benefit playing him.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. So, I mean, if that's the case, I mean, he goes 6-7 innings and can kind of limit to 2 or 3 walks, which is asking a lot. I could definitely see a viable start there.
Yeah, he's definitely not. He's not safe for cash by any stretch of the imagination. But if you're in a bind on DraftKings, you could kind of play him and sort of do okay.
Yeah, definitely, especially with all those stacking options that you probably want to give exposure to tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Outside of a few guys on the slate, I feel like this is mainly a hitter's slate. And I feel like we get a lot of those where the starting pitchers are just okay outside of 1 or 2, and then you just got to rely on the bats.
Yep, definitely is. And that feels like how it is tonight. And always kind of deeper into the year, it seems like we get more and more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys got a lot of guys on the DL now, and you got young guys coming up making spot starts. So definitely it's going to be high scoring from here on out.
Yeah, it certainly is. And we saw that really the last few nights or last week or so.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like the end of the NBA season all over again.
Oh, that's always a mess.
Yep.
That's going to wrap things up with the pitcher nail down. Be sure to check out DaveFantasyCafe.com for all great tools and content.